Welcome, welcome. We're going to give everybody about 60 seconds to get logged in. I'm very excited you guys are here. While everybody gets logged in, why don't you throw in a chat? Let's see. Let's have an emoji for how you're feeling right now. So many emojis to choose from. How are you guys feeling today? It is dark here already. I don't know how I feel about the time change. Is anybody else ever excited to fall back or spring forward? Um, it is very, very shocking. I never remember until it's 2 a.m. It looks like we have one person who is happy. I'm glad you're happy to be here. I'm happy that you're here too. What about anybody else? How are the rest of you feeling today? Does anybody have any particularly amazing weather? It's been really humid here in the Triad. Happy faces abound. I'm glad you guys are happy on Wednesday. Wednesdays are always my least favorite day of the week because you're never further from the weekend than you are on a Wednesday. It's 2 days on either side. Okay. Well, we are going to be respectful of your time, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, I'm super excited you guys are here. My name is Anastasia, and I'm a parent educator with the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, and today we're here to talk about 504 plans. Um, so as you guys have questions, comments, throw comments in the chat, but if you'll put your questions in the Q&A, it's a little easier to keep track of where they are. But if you put them in the chat, I will go back to them. Okay, so let's get started. So a little bit about ECAC. ECAC is a private statewide nonprofit parent organization, and we are dedicated to improving the lives and education of all children, but we do have a special emphasis on children with disabilities and special health care needs. We serve as North Carolina's Parent and Training Information Center, and the purpose of a Parent Training and Information Center, also known as a PTI, is to teach parents of children with disabilities about their educational rights under the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so, really, we provide parents with information about their child's disability. We talk to youth and young adults about self-advocacy. We provide resources to help families access and locate resources, as well as to become the best advocates they can be for their kiddos. One really cool thing about all of the parent educators here at ECAC is we are all parents of children with special needs. I am the mom of a very complex 3-year-old, but some of our parent educators have adult children now, and they run a wide gamut of disability. So my kiddo has very complex needs. Some of my colleagues, their kiddos have ADHD or autism. And so really, when you call us, we are someone who has been there, will be there, or somebody that can walk alongside you in many of these processes. Um, we help families to navigate systems like early intervention, special education, as well as the transition to adulthood, because we really want families to be able to make informed decisions and communicate effectively so that they can be their child's best advocate in school, community, and life. We also serve as North Carolina's Family to Family Health Information Center. And in addition to helping families with the special education system, we specialize in helping families navigate those complicated health-related systems in North Carolina. So a little bit about Family to Family Health Information Centers, also called F2Fs. They are family-led centers funded by the Health Resources and Services Administration, also known as HRSA. There is one F2F in each state, and each of those is staffed by knowledgeable family members who have firsthand experience with understanding the challenges faced by families and children, families of children and youth with special health care needs. So the person that runs that program does a lot of work talking about the different kinds of waivers, talking about the differences between SSI and SSDI, and she's has a lot of resources to connect families to different kind of community resources. So definitely give us a call if that is something that you want more information about. Okay, so a little bit about our funded partners. So ECIC partners with multiple agencies that have a shared desire to improve outcomes for children with disabilities. Some of these partnerships include the North Carolina Deaf Blind Project. Now, one thing I always like to stop and mention here is a child does not have to be totally deaf and totally blind to access this project. Any combination of vision and hearing loss qualifies a child to be eligible for this program. So ECIC works in collaboration with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction as well as Eastern Carolina University, ECU, to provide a variety of supports and services designed to meet the needs of families with children who have deaf blindness, ages birth through 22, as well as those who educate them. One of the cool things about that project is they do have access at ECU to some people who can help support the educators that are working with our kiddos who are deaf blind and have unique needs. We also partner with the North Carolina State Improvement Project, also known as NC-SIP. This is in conjunction with the Department of Public Instruction and is funded through the U.S. Department of Education. And this project works to improve the quality and effectiveness of educational programs and instruction for students with disabilities in North Carolina. We also have a contract with the Department of Public Instruction, the Office of Exceptional Children, and we work in collaboration with them to create resources and provide trainings. And one thing we're very excited about is we also have the Achieve Transition program, which is funded through EIPD, which is the new name for what used to be Voc Rehab. And it is a virtual pre-employment transition service program, also known as PREETS. And it is open to kids or youth ages 16 through 21 across the state, including students who attend public schools, charter schools, and even students who are homeschooled. And the courses include self-advocacy, job exploration, and workplace readiness to help prepare students for a bright future beyond college. Okay, let's get started. So, one word. In the chat, I want you guys to give me one word that describes how you feel about 504 plans. Do you feel confident, confused, frustrated? How do you feel? Great words. We've got learning, confused. Well, I'm excited you guys are here. Intimidated. That is a great word. A lot of these processes can be scary, especially if it's your first time going through it and it's a new thing and you can only know what you know and until you have the opportunity to learn more. Things can be scary and intimidating. Interesting. It's an opportunity, learning. Those are great words. So let's talk a little bit about what our learning opportunities are, what our learning objectives are today. So we're going to list the rights that students with disabilities have under Section 504. We're going to list some examples of accommodations, and we're going to locate some resources to help us to better understand. So there are two formal ways to serve eligible students with disabilities. There's Section 504 and IDEA. These are the federal laws that apply to special education. Because these are federal laws, they apply across the whole United States. So let's talk about Section 504. Section 504 is a federal law that prohibits disability discrimination by recipients of federal financial assistance. All public schools and school districts, as well as public charter schools and magnet schools that receive federal funding, must comply with Section 504. Section 504 is an anti-discrimination civil rights statute that requires the needs of students with disabilities to be met as adequately as the needs of the non-disabled peers are met. So this allows for equal access, equal opportunity of a qualified person with a disability to participate in or benefit from educational aid, benefits, or services. It also requires, among other things, that students with disabilities receive an equal opportunity to participate in athletics, extracurricular activities, and to be free from bullying and harassment based on disability. So let's talk a little bit about what equal access means. So I want you guys to imagine that you're standing at a fence and there are three people standing at this fence, and we all need to be able to see over this fence. Person A is tall enough they can see over the fence. Person B needs a step ladder to see over the fence, and person C just needs a step stool. So what we're talking about is giving every kiddo, giving kiddos with disabilities equal access to their learning so that they can all see over the fence. Now, what that looks like from child to child can be very different. Some children with a disability may only need very minor accommodations, while other children may need more. But what we want is for them to have equal access to their education like their non-disabled peers. So, Section 504 gives two important rights to students in publicly funded schools. Cannot discriminate against a child who has or is thought to have a disability, and they must provide reasonable accommodations and services so students can participate and benefit from school programs. Now, we're going to talk later about that word reasonable because it's really important. So keep that word in your mind as we go through. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the important parts of the wording here. So how does Section 504 define an individual with a disability? So this includes students who have a disability, have a record of a disability, or are regarded as having a disability, because an impairment in and of itself is not a disability. So the impairment must substantially limit one or more of the major life activities to be considered a disability under Section 504. Section 504 defines a physical or mental impairment as any physiological disorder or condition, cosmetic disfigurement, or anatomical loss affecting one or the more following systems: neurological, musculoskeletal, special sense organs, respiratory, etc. So this also includes any mental or psychological disorders. Now, this definition is not inclusive of all specific diseases and conditions that may be physical or mental impairments because it's not an exhaustive list, right? But to qualify for a 504 plan, you have to have a disability and it has to cause a substantial limitation to a major life activity. So the determination of a substantial limitation is going to be made on a case-by-case basis with respect to each student. It requires that for elementary and secondary school students that a group of knowledgeable persons draw upon information from a variety of resources to make that determination that there is a substantial limitation to a major life activity. Now, major life activities can include a lot of different things. So these are going to be basic activities that the average person in the general population can do without difficulties. So this is going to include certain acts like hearing, speaking, lifting, bodily functions such as lung disease, diabetes, things like that. It's also going to include things like concentration, communicating, learning. Also, major, like I just said, major bodily functions are a part of major life activities as well. Okay, so some of the commonly covered, again, this is not an exhaustive list, but some of the commonly covered ones are asthma, ADD, ADHD, auditory or visual processing disorder, cancer, depression, diabetes, dyslexia, epilepsy, learning disabilities, limited sight or hearing, medically fragile children, physical disabilities or mobility issues, or severe allergies. But let's talk about what a 504 plan is. So remember, if a child is identified with a disability that is impacting their ability, their major life activity, it can count. So a 504 plan, though not explicitly required by the department's Section 504 regulations, school districts often document the elements of an individual student's free and appropriate public education under Section 504 in a document. This is typically referred to as a Section 504 plan. Section 504 allows for equal access, so equal opportunity of a qualified person with a disability to participate in or benefit from educational aid, benefits, or services. A written plan is often useful as a way to document that the school district is engaged in the process to identify and address the needs of a student with a disability and to communicate to all personnel the information needed for successful implementation, right? Because if you didn't have it written down, how are we going to follow it? How are we going to pass that to everyone? So OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, encourages all schools to document 504 services in a written plan because that's going to help to prevent any misunderstandings or communicate or confusion and miscommunications about what services the school is offering to the student. So, who is on the 504 team? Who's going to help us make those decisions? So Section 504 is going to require that a group of knowledgeable persons draw upon information from a variety of sources to make that determination. This is different than an IEP, because in an IEP, there are required members of the team under IDEA, but for Section 504, it only requires a group of knowledgeable persons. And oftentimes this is going to be the school counselor or sometimes the principal, and then the child's teacher as a part of this. So we are going to watch a short video. I see some questions in the chat. Some of them are very specific. And so for part of this webinar, we're not going to answer questions about specific kiddos. I would love for you guys to fill out our parent educator contact form. And through that, we'll be able to give you specific advice for your specific kiddo. We'll be able to provide you with more resources and support that are relevant to your specific circumstances. So I will send that as in the follow-up email along with the presentation today for you guys to take a look at. As we play this video, if you guys could give me a thumbs up in the chat, just to make sure that you guys can hear it.
Children who have certain learning or attention issues but don't need special education might qualify for a 504 plan. These plans are designed for students with disabilities who need supports in order to learn alongside their peers. 504 plans aren't part of special education like IEPs are. They're covered by the Rehabilitation Act, which is a civil rights law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination. The purpose of 504 plans is to remove barriers to learning. Just like a ramp into the school building removes a barrier for students in wheelchairs. The plans make changes to the environment, not to the instruction. Students often get a 504 plan after being denied eligibility for special education. Parents can also request a 504 plan for their child. 504s have a much broader definition of disability than IEPs. So a student might have an evaluation because of trouble completing tests and writing assignments. The results might reveal a slow processing speed, but no other issues. Still, there's an issue getting in the way of the student's performance in school. In this case, the student doesn't need special instruction, but does need support. So the school might recommend extended time or note-taking services. Another student might get preferred seating or an extra set of text through a 504 plan. There's no standardized template or form for 504 plans. But the plan should include specific accommodations, supports, and services. It also should have the name of the people providing the services, plus the name of the person who's responsible for making sure the plan is followed. 504s have far fewer requirements than IEPs, and the rules about who's on the 504 team at school are much less specific than with IEP teams. The team might include a child's regular education teacher, a special education teacher, or a school social worker who's familiar with the child. Parents are also typically on the team, although the school isn't required to involve them. Another role for parents is monitoring the 504 plan to make sure all the supports are being followed and their child is getting the needed help. 504 plans offer less of a safety net than IEPs, but that can encourage kids to become self-advocates. The more they can speak up for themselves as they make their way through school, college, work, and into the adult world, the more help they can get for themselves when they need it.
Okay. I guess we don't need to watch it twice, you guys. I trust that you watched it the first time. Okay, so what might a 504 plan look like? So in North Carolina, most public schools are using the program ECATS, which stands for Every Child Accountability Tracking Software. And that's the platform they're using for kids with IEPs, individualized education programs. This program does have an add-on feature for 504 plans. LEAs, local education agencies, are not required to use this. So while many of them do, and you'll see ECATS in the little left hand of the paper, they're not required to use them, right? So um, it may look like this one, where it lists the accommodations, the settings, and the person responsible, or it could look like something like this. Some districts have their own 504 plans, but what you want it to say is what the accommodation is, who is responsible for providing it, when it's going to be provided. You want all of the implementation specifics. We have seen quite a few 504 plans that say as needed, when requested, and that's very ambiguous, right? So you really want it to be very specific, depending on the accommodation. But you want it to be pretty specific about when that accommodation is going to be used and how it's going to be used. One example would be preferential seating. We see preferential seating a lot. However, sometimes people forget to clarify what preferential seating needs to look like. If you're using preferential seating to have a child seated near the teacher, then you need to consider where the teacher is teaching in the room. Um, I had a parent reach out who had her child had preferential seating on his 504 plan because he needed to be near the teacher. However, that teacher taught at the back of the room, and preferential seating was interpreted as being, at the front of the class and nearest to the board. So in that case, the mark was missed because the kiddo needed to be near the teacher, but the way that it was written, the kiddo was placed at the front of the room, which was actually the furthest away from the teacher. So you really want to think about the design and implementation of any accommodations that are put in the plan about how they're going to be implemented, who is responsible for implementing them, just so that it's very specific and clear. And whenever possible, we want to remove the words like when requested, as needed, because that really puts the onus on somebody to determine whether they feel like that's needed or required, which if an accommodation is needed and it's listed, um, then it's needed, right? So taking out some of that language um, is better so that it's crystal clear about this is the accommodation, this is when it's needed, this is how it's going to be provided. So accommodations must be reasonable. They cannot be overly burdensome to the school, and they can be different from what a parent requests. You could make a proposal for an accommodation, and the school may think, okay, we can implement that in a different way. An example of that would be I had a family reach out, and their kiddo wanted to listen to music. The noise from the peers was too much in the classroom. She thought she could focus better if she was able to listen to music in the classroom. The school said, you can use noise canceling headphones, but we can't listen to music because we need you to be focused on your learning. That's still a reasonable accommodation that provides the same benefit, right? It tunes out the peers. And so they can propose other ways to meet that need. And we're going to talk through some examples in just a few minutes. First, we're going to watch this video about accommodations and modifications. I did see a couple of questions that I thought we could answer really quick before we started, though. Um, so, do 504 plans allow the child to complete work outside of the classroom? So I think it depends on what your accommodations are listed. Many 504 plans have accommodations for extra time where children can have more time to work on assignments as needed, when needed, depending on the project. Sometimes they chunk assignments or projects are broken down into smaller parts. It really needs to be based on what your kiddo needs in order to access their education. Um, So, does a student need a medical diagnosis for a 504, and who can make that diagnosis? So, a lot of times the answer is yes, because a child has to have an identified disability. Now, if the school requires evaluations to identify that, they can conduct those. Sometimes, though, if you already have doctor documentation, you can use that. And we can you can use that as your support that yes, they have a disability. We're going to talk a little bit in a bit about the differences between IEP and 504 plans. So I see that question, but we're going to hold off on answering it until we get there, just so that we're talking about it all at once. Okay, so we are going to watch this video on accommodations.
She will help row the boat.
For students with disabilities, the right accommodations and modifications can be as important to school success as appropriate IEP goals. These educational supports are similar, but they are not the same. Accommodations change how a student accesses information, participates in school activities, or demonstrates their learning. They do not change the curriculum. Modifications, however, change what is being taught or what a student is expected to learn and demonstrate.
I only need you to do the circled problems for me.
Accommodations can be made by adjusting the amount of work a student must complete, allowing extra time,
Just go ahead and turn your paper in.
Okay, you can go ahead and keep working. You've got about 5 more minutes.
adapting assignments,
Alex, I have your shapes here. Good.
providing extra assistance, or changing the physical setting.
Let's do one more page today.
There is no one set list. Because each child is unique, the IEP team must identify specific strategies to help your child succeed. For example, presenting a few math problems at a time may help a student who is easily overwhelmed. Another student might benefit from short breaks, or being allowed to finish an assignment at home. A student who has difficulty writing may be allowed the use of a computer, while students with a print disability may benefit from having tests read aloud.
They went downtown.
A child can be given an appropriate role when working in small groups,
Where am I?
or be allowed to participate in an activity in a different way.
Beware of what? Excuse me?
Being seated near the teacher helps some students stay focused,
So we'll go ahead and discuss these in a minute.
and assistive technology can support a wide range of needs.
And if you need me, you can raise your hand and I'll come and help you. All right?
In addition to accommodations, it is sometimes necessary to modify the curriculum. For example, when the class is learning how to tell time, one child might be expected to identify only the hours. While the class is working on vocabulary and spelling, another child may work from a shorter list or focus exclusively on the meaning of key words.
Insects with 8 legs.
Parents play a vital role in crafting the IEP. After all, no one knows your child better. So at home, watch for what works and any struggles that continue. Talk to your child about what feels right to him or to her. Make sure the IEP team considers your child's needs throughout the entire school day, including classroom time, non-academic and extracurricular activities, and transportation. You are not expected to have all the answers. Other members of the IEP team will have much to contribute. You can help by making sure that all accommodations and modifications are clearly written into the IEP. Be sure to ask whether any of the modifications will impact your child's graduation. Ask questions, offer ideas, and bring up any concerns you may have. Open dialogue and clear documentation are essential to developing a high-quality IEP.
When he gets to middle school.
I didn't know it was this.
So we're going to stop there because the rest is not relevant to 504 plans. But for 504 plans, we're looking at accommodations that help our kiddos to access their education. We are going to look at some very specific ones as we... I don't know why the videos want to play twice, you guys. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to talk about accommodation. We're going to start by talking about reasonable versus not reasonable. So things that are not considered reasonable are things that fundamentally alter the essential nature of the course, curriculum, or program. Things that are constitute services of personal nature, or result in an undue administrative or financial burden, or pose a direct threat to safety. Now, we're going to look at some scenarios in a second, so keep that in mind because we're going to talk about whether an accommodation is reasonable or not. But first, let's talk about the difference between a 504 and an IEP. So the difference is really, does the student require specially designed instruction? If a child requires specially designed instruction, then the team needs to consider an IEP. Because that's really the difference. If a child has a 504 plans, then we are saying as a team that with accommodations, the child is able to access their education. If the child requires special education or specially designed instruction, then the team would need to consider an individualized education program because if a 504 plan does not offer specially designed instruction. So that is the big difference. And you guys are going to get a copy of this presentation, which has this chart on it. But the biggest difference is that provision of specially designed instruction. Okay. We are at my favorite part, scenario time. I hope you guys are excited. I am always excited for this part. So Matthew is a high school student who has a medical condition and a physical disability that requires a wheelchair and life-sustaining equipment. The high school classes are all on the second floor. The accommodations he currently has include a one-on-one paraprofessional and the use of an elevator. His parents are concerned about fire drills and the possibility that the elevators might not work because Matthew and his equipment are quite heavy. They are requesting a wheelchair lift be installed on the staircase that all students use. Is this reasonable? Is this reasonable? I always think I should play Jeopardy music here. Okay, I see a lot of great answers. You're right. So this creates a financial burden as well as safety concerns. So what the school did instead is they offered for Matthew to attend another high school within the district where the high school classes were all on the main level. So that's reasonable. They offered to move him to a school where this was no longer a concern because I agree, that's a huge concern, right? You have a kid with a wheelchair because what if there's a real fire? And you're not supposed to use the elevator in a real fire. How would you get down? But then there's also the safety concern. If you're in a high school with a wheelchair lift, there are going to be other students who maybe want to jump on that wheelchair lift so that you have to worry about the equipment, who is going to be qualified to operate the equipment. There's a lot of different things that can go into play there, but this is a reasonable accommodation. So they found a way to meet the need for the student in a different way. Okay. Aubrey has a visual impairment that causes extreme light sensitivity and is starting kindergarten in the fall. Her parents visited the school and they noticed that the entryway has floor-to-ceiling windows and is really, really bright. They are requesting that the school cover the windows with drapes or blackout window film. Do you guys think that is reasonable? And if you If you don't think it's reasonable, what are some other ideas that you have that could meet that need? So, similar to what was just posted in the chat, the school suggested that Aubrey could wear a hat and sunglasses in school so that she is protected from the brightness, but they don't have to they don't have to black out their windows. Um, it is a much more reasonable ask, so they found a way to meet that need, right? We can be creative with how we are meeting the needs, but they were able to meet that need without covering everything with drapes because um there are other kids who may really need that light, right? There are some kiddos who would need that light to be able to see well. Let's look at the next one. So Dante has ADHD and sensory processing disorder. He requires movement and sensory breaks. His accommodations include being able to shoot a few hoops when he is dysregulated. The school has a pool, and the parents are requesting that he be allowed to also take a swim to regulate. What do you guys think about that one? I see some really interesting answers. So let's talk about it a little bit. So in this case, the school stuck with access to the gym to shoot basketball hoops because this was reasonable. But let's talk about swimming. So there's a lot of reasons that swimming might not be a reasonable request. So for his safety, swimming would require additional staff, and that additional staff would need to be, certified to save a life. In addition to that, swimming would take additional time away from his classroom because it would require him to change clothes because, he'd have to change clothes to swim and to come back. So that's additional time. But also, if he just needs a movement break, there are tons of ways that we can access movement. Swimming is a safety concern because somebody has to watch him. That's extra time out of his classroom. It's just not safe. And so the school in this case, if basketball hoops is able to meet the need, we don't need to create that additional barrier. Especially since you're thinking like if a child needs a movement and sensory break, that's not going to be a planned activity, right? Because he may need that at spur of the moment, and going swimming, like I said, requires extra staffing that might not be available at the drop of a hat. So those are all things that have to be taken into consideration when we're thinking about accommodations. Okay. So Mandy has a metabolic disorder that requires her to eat a snack every hour. The school is allowing her to snack in the classroom during every class period except for science lab. During science, she is eating at the desk in a hallway. Her parents are requesting that she be allowed to eat in the science lab. What do you guys think about that one? You guys are so smart tonight. You guys are doing a great job. So, eating in the science lab where the dissections occur and chemicals are used, it's not safe. The accommodation of eating in the hallway is reasonable. They're still giving her the opportunity to eat a snack. It's just in a different environment to ensure her safety, right? So that she's not eating, her food is not coming into contact with any products that wouldn't be safe to her. And so, while that may be lonely. Hopefully her snack won't take very long, because eating in the science lab could be quite dangerous. Okay. So Ricardo has a peanut allergy. His fourth grade class is going on a field trip to the local aquarium, and Ricardo's father is told that he must chaperone Ricardo on the trip because the teachers will be very busy and cannot ensure that Ricardo will be protected from exposure to peanuts or peanut products while on the trip, especially during the lunch break. Ricardo's father cannot go on the field trip because he has to go to work. As a result, the teachers tell Ricardo he cannot attend the field trip. Ricardo's father complains to the principal, noting that no other parent is required to attend the field trip. Should the school have required his father to attend the field trip? What do you guys think? So I see a lot of different answers. So let's talk about it. So in this case, the answer is no. None of the parents of students without disabilities were told that they must attend a field trip. Therefore, the school may not require Ricardo's father's attendance simply because Ricardo has a disability. Under Section 504, the school is responsible for making it possible for Ricardo to participate without parental assistance. Now, let's talk about what that could look like, right? So, really, they should have enough personnel on the trip to keep the children safe. Also, we're not talking about a 3 or a 4-year-old who is likely to just grab food. We're talking about a 9-year-old who's probably educated on his peanut allergy. But if not, when the school is packing the lunch, it can be kept separate. It can be kept in a separate bag. It can be kept in a separate cooler. There are a lot of ways to reduce the possibility that he would have any type of allergic reaction. And then to prepare, they should certainly make sure that, if he has the type of allergy needed, that he would need any type of EpiPen or something like that, that they have somebody on the trip who is trained to provide that. There are a lot of schools that are peanut free since nut allergies are pretty common. However, that is not a reason to request that his dad attend and the child could not attend without that. Nobody else is being asked, and there are a lot of ways to work around that, to ensure that he won't come into contact with other peanut products. We need to think about there are lots of ways to keep a child safe from nut allergies, but saying that he can't go on the field trip because he has a nut allergy, that certainly isn't fair. So making accommodations, making sure his food is separate, those are all reasonable ways to ensure that he has the ability to participate in those learning activities. So, Section 504 procedural safeguards. So, school districts must provide notice to parents explaining any evaluation and placement decisions affecting their child, and they must explain parents' rights to review relevant records and contest any decisions regarding evaluations and placements through an impartial hearing. Most school districts have, when you set up your 504 plan, they usually will tell you what their who to contact if there's an issue. So on site, there is the school district, the actual school Section 504 coordinator. It's typically the school counselor, but most school districts will also have a district level Section 504 coordinator that you can go to as well when you have concerns or problems that are occurring. Now, one of the things that you have under Section 504 is the Office of Civil Rights, which is part of the Department of Education, also called OCR. And this is the federal agency that enforces federal civil rights law in schools and other educational institutions. So they can investigate allegations that a school district violated Section 504 or Title II rights, including the right to free and appropriate public education, etc. And so many schools have also those internal process, grievance and complaint processes that we just talked about. And but it's not required that an individual go through those internal processes before they file an OCR complaint. Something that is important if you decide to file an OCR complaint, is that after the complaint is filed, the Office of Civil Rights is going to evaluate those claims to decide if they want to investigate. If they decide to investigate, they will send the filer and the school a letter saying that they are opening an investigation. And then they may review any documents, interview any witnesses and personnel of the school that the complaint is against. They also can conduct site visits. And then at the end of that investigation, they will decide whether they believe discrimination has occurred. And they will provide a letter explaining their findings. Now, sometimes it can take a really long time to go through that process. So it can take months or sometimes years to be resolved. But this process can mandate districts to take steps to rid the educational environments of discrimination if they determine that a district has violated students or staff members' civil rights. In addition, if they find that a child or a staff member has suffered discrimination, they can require the district make changes necessary. That can include changing policies, offering trainings, conducting school climate surveys, and their office can also withhold federal funds from the institution or refer the complaint to the Department of Justice. So it is one option that families have if they feel that their kiddo has, or that a staff member has been discriminated against. Currently, when we last looked, North Carolina had more than 339 pending OCR investigations against some of the K-12 schools. There are also 129 at the colleges and universities. Now, some of these were a year or two old where they're still being investigated, because remember, the Office of Civil Rights is a federal entity and they get a lot of reports. So it can take some time to work through that process, but it is an option that families have. One of the things, again, that Section 504 prohibits against is disability-based harassment by their peers that is sufficiently serious to deny or limit that student's ability to participate in or benefit from the school's educational programs and activities. So in other words, if it creates a hostile environment. When a school district knows or reasonably should know of possible disability-based harassment, they must take immediate and appropriate steps to investigate or otherwise determine what occurred. If an investigation reveals that the harassment created a hostile environment, they must take prompt and effective steps to end the harassment, eliminate the hostile environment, and prevent it from reoccurring. So appropriate steps to end that could include separating the student who was harassed and the student that was engaged in the harassing behavior, providing counseling, or taking disciplinary action. These steps should not penalize the student who was harassed. In addition to that, Section 504 prohibits retaliation. So, discriminatory practices are often only raised and remedied when students, parents, teachers, coaches, and others can report such practices to school administrators without the fear of retaliation. Individuals should be committed when they raise concerns about compliance with the federal civil rights laws, not punished for doing so, right? You should be able to tell those that are in charge that there is this issue and you shouldn't be afraid that there will be a retaliation. So Section 504 actually protects students with IEPs as well. They still have that protection from retaliation as well. So Some of our key takeaways is that all public schools that receive federal funding must comply with Section 504. A school must, at no cost to parents, evaluate students who are suspected of having a disability. OCR encourages schools to document those 504 services in a written plan, but this is not explicitly required. I haven't seen a school that doesn't, but it is not explicitly required. They are encouraged to. And then obviously there are the grievance process. Every district has their own grievance process, as well as families can file OCR complaints. So the next thing I want to look at is some resources. I'm going to send all of these out afterwards, but I thought we would just take a little bit of time to look at them. So this first one is our Section 504 fact sheet. And basically the first page tells you what Section 504 is, as well as how a disability is defined. And it goes through those three things that we talked about. What are major life activities? What is a physical mental impairment? And then what is the requirement? And so looking here, 504 plan is a written plan that describes the disability-related needs of an individual student and how those needs will be met. And so it can talk about accommodations like extra time, special materials, changes to the environment, as well as it can talk about assistive technology needs. Some kids need audiobooks. Some kids need magnifiers so that they can read in bigger print. Some kiddos need access to Braille materials. It also can identify school services that a child may need, like there are some kids that require nursing services so that they can eat by a G-tube or things like that. And then it also briefly describes parent rights. This is just a good handout for everybody to have, just so that it is available for you guys. I'm going to put the link in the chat, but you will get a follow-up email that also has this resource. And then, so these two are lists of accommodations. So this first one is if the student has this difficulty, then try this. And it has some ideas, because one of the cool things about accommodations when you're thinking about equal access is these can be unique. I know a lot of times we see ones that are pretty cookie cutter, like preferential seating, extra time. But if there's something that you think your child needs, you can certainly bring it up to the team that's working with them, right? And bring it to the table for discussion. It is certainly something worth talking about. So we can also think about how we're giving directions, right? Some kids require visuals, and if that's all they require is they need that visual interaction, that can be put in there. Turning in work, we can have a visual reminder. So this is just some examples. That it is about 5 pages. It has a really broad list, and the other one is the same. It's just a broad list of accommodation ideas just for you guys to get started, because it can be hard sometimes to just think about your kiddo and think, oh, I don't know where to start. And sometimes you're going to want to try something and the team may not want to try that, but you could ask, could we try it for 6 weeks? Could we just give it a try? And if he does really well with it, then we can add it to the 504 plan. It is always okay to try and get the team's buy-in for responding to to accommodation ideas that may be different, or they may offer ideas. If you want one type of accommodation and the school is not buying into that, ask them, okay, so here's the need. This is what my child needs. This is why I thought this would be a good way. What are your ideas for meeting the same need? What are different accommodations that you have thought of that could provide the same benefit, right? And we'll see what their buy-in is, and providing some additional ideas, because it's a team, right? It's not just you or just them. We can all work together to think about what we're going to put on the 504 plan for accommodations. And then here also is just some sample accommodations. We see sensory breaks fairly regularly, thinking about their seating. Remember, You want to be specific about how these things are going to be implemented, and who is responsible for implementing them. This one also has some organizational strategies, evaluation strategies. Oh, um, one thing that we did not talk about, maybe we missed a slide, testing accommodations. It is really important that if your kiddo has testing accommodations, that they are in place more than 30 days before any end of grade EOC testing, right? It needs to be an accommodation that they are using regularly, for them to be able to use it on the state testing. So you want to make sure that if your kiddo needs extra time or the different kinds of support available for those testing sessions, that that is provided and that they're being implemented for like tests across the board. So you want to make sure those are in place more than 30 days ahead of the testing dates. And so these are really good resources just to look through and to get some starting ideas of what your kiddo needs. And until the accommodations are in place, right, it's hard to know if this will work. So it's a good idea to regularly review and to think about what your kiddo needs and how it can be provided. And it could be that you add extended time for assignments and your kiddo doesn't need that. They're not using it, but they might need fill in the blank notes. There are some kiddos who really struggle with when they get to high school with those long pages of notes for like history classes, but they do really well and can follow along really well if they just need to fill in the blank. And so those are some ideas, or use a voice recorder to record the lecture. We can be fairly creative as long as everybody is in agreement. And so having other people offer ideas and support is always helpful. Now, this last resource here, we're not going to go through. I'm just going to open it. Oh, it's the parent educator guide to section 504. So this is fairly lengthy, but it does have a lot of great information. So a lot of times I send it out to families anyway, just so that they have it and can take a look at it. There is also a letter for families of kiddos who have ADHD that is also very helpful, as well as there are some other lists that are available just for families of kids who have ADHD to take a look at for the same reason, right? If my kiddo is struggling with this, then I can consider possibly offering these types of accommodations, because we are meant to work, in conjunction and collaboration with the teams that we're working with. So as you guys are thinking about what accommodations your child would benefit from, you want to think about what their needs are, what they're struggling with, and ways to bridge that to allow them to have the same access as their peers. Okay, so I saw a couple questions. So now it's time for questions. We went through a little faster tonight than we do other nights. Before I start answering questions, I do want to go ahead and launch our poll. As you guys know, we are federally funded. And because we are federally funded, they like to know how we're doing. One of the things that I will ask you to do is at the very end, there is a open-ended question. And if you guys will put topics that you guys would like to see webinars on, we regularly do webinars on IEP processes and things of that nature. But if you guys put other ideas for things you'd like to see, sometimes we will look at that to make determinations for what we're doing. This is Family Engagement Month, so definitely take a look at our events calendar. Our Tool Time Tuesdays are all about family engagement and ways to engage with the school in partnership and collaboration. And we are so excited for all of the work that my colleagues are doing on that project to ensure that we have calendars. We produce calendars every year that talk about family engagement this month. Because November is Family Engagement Month. Okay, so if you guys have questions, I do see some questions about intermittent homebound. That is something that can be discussed and considered, especially with medical documentation. I would encourage you, since this is a very specific question, if you will reach out to us with our parent educator contact form, we can provide more individualized support. I will send that out in our follow-up email so that we can provide that to you guys too. Yes, so we offer a couple different IEP webinars, you guys. We offer one is called an IEP Road Trip, which is a very good overview of the entire IEP. It looks at the different sections. We also have a more in-depth one called Writing Effective IEPs. I also have one that I do that talks about present levels and goals and how they need to go hand in hand. At the end of the month, one of the ones that I am going to do this month is called where we're going to look at data and talk about how to use that data to make data informed decisions. So definitely, as part of our follow-up email, I will include the link to in addition to including our parent educator contact form, I will also include our upcoming events so that you guys can click on it and see the other things we have coming up this month. Actually, I will take you there. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Yes. Okay. So if you guys go here, we can see our upcoming events. So this month we have this Tool Time Tuesday has already happened, and this is where we are today. So next week, Tool Time Tuesday is going to be resources for families, looking at family engagement. Then there's nothing selfish about self-care. As you know, it is hard sometimes, right, to build in time for self-care, but it's so important because how can we be the best advocates for our kids if we're not able to take a moment and practice good self-care, right? We don't want to run on empty because it's hard to fill other spoons and meet their capacity if we're not taking care of ourselves, right? And then we have the Tell Us Something Good award updates and tips, which is coming up. I have a webinar that week too that's not listed on here. It should be listed later this week. She was working on this yesterday. So hopefully that will be listed up here. In addition, I have a couple other 504 resources that I'm going to make sure that you guys get so that you guys can take a look at so that you guys can advocate for your kiddos because we really want you guys to be the best advocates that you can be because we know that you know your kids best. And so, we really want to partner with you in providing individualized support that is helpful and relevant to you guys. Does anybody have any additional questions? After you guys fill out the poll, if you don't have any questions, you guys can go, but I budgeted another 20 minutes, so I have 20 minutes. If you guys have generalized questions that you guys want to ask, I'm happy to answer. I did see we did have some questions about some of the high school pathways, and I would love to answer those if you would fill out our parent educator contact form. I'm going to show you guys how to get to it here, just so that you guys will know. You're just going to go to Connect, work with a parent educator, and then you just go here and the form is here. I'm also going to go ahead and copy and paste it into the chat so that you guys can click on it and fill it out if you have individualized questions that you would like support with. We are always happy to help. Right now, we are able to get back to families within 48 hours, usually within 24 hours. We're able to get back to you guys to ensure that we are able to give assistance. So definitely reach out. We are always happy to help. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I'm going to let you guys go early for the night. Please feel free to fill out our contact form. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you guys at the next one.